Hello everyone, and welcome back to episode 2 of Silent Dale's Dark Tales. If you're new here, I'm not a historian, not a professional researcher. I'm just an amateur who enjoys digging into old Yorkshire stories as a hobby. Today's episode takes us to the spa town of Ilkley, a place known for its clean air, Victorian charm, and the famous moor that inspired generations of writers. But beneath the calm surface, Ilkley has its own dark chapters. This is the tragic story of Martha Smith, a woman whose life ended violently in 1905 at the hands of her husband, George Smith. A crime that shocked the town, filled the newspapers, and led to one of the swiftest trials of the Edwardian era. Ilkley in 1905 was a fashionable place. People came from across Britain to take the waters, breathe the fresh moorland air, and escape the grime of the industrial cities. Electric trams had just begun running, hotels and boarding houses were thriving, and the town was proud of its reputation as a peaceful, respectable community. But on the 12th of September 1905, that peace was shattered. Martha Smith lived with her husband George at a house called the Kells on Riddings Road, a quiet residential street not far from the moor. Neighbours described Martha as gentle, polite and well-liked. George, however, was known for something else entirely. So who was George Smith? George Smith was a labourer, strong, capable and physically imposing, but he also had a reputation for drinking, arguing and losing his temper. He and Martha had been married for several years, but their relationship was strained. Arguments were common. Neighbours heard raised voices more than once, and in the weeks leading up to the murder, George's behaviour had become increasingly unstable. Some reports suggested he was jealous. Others said he was struggling with work and money, and some believed he simply had a violent streak that was getting worse. Whatever the cause, the tension inside the Kells was building. The day of the murder. On the morning of 12th of September 1905, Martha and George were at home. What began as an argument quickly escalated into something far more dangerous. At some point during the confrontation, George armed himself with a knife. What happened next was brutal. Martha was stabbed multiple times. Her throat was cut. The attack was so violent that neighbours later said they could hear the commotion from the street. By the time help arrived, Martha was dead. George fled the house, leaving behind a scene that horrified even the most experienced officers. The manhunt. News of the murder spread quickly through Ilkley. Police launched an immediate search for George Smith, who had vanished after the attack. He was last seen heading away from the town, and officers believed he might try to escape by train. For 2 days, there was no sign of him. Then, on the 14th of September, George was found in Wakefield, tired, dishevelled, and offering little resistance. He was arrested and taken to face trial. The newspapers wasted no time. Headlines described the murder as shocking, savage, and a crime that stunned Ilkley. On to the trial at Leeds Assizes. George Smith's trial took place at Leeds Assizes, the same court that handled many of Yorkshire's most serious crimes. The evidence was overwhelming. Witnesses described the couple's arguments, police detailed the scene inside the house, and George himself admitted to the killing. The jury took very little time to reach a verdict. George Smith was found guilty of murder and was sentenced to death. Unlike some cases of the era, there was no successful plea of insanity, no last-minute appeal, and no public sympathy. The crime was simply too violent, the evidence too clear. On the 28th of December 1905, George Smith was executed at Armley Prison in Leeds, the same prison used for many capital cases in Yorkshire. Executions at the time were carried out by a hangman, John Billington, one of the most experienced executioners in Britain. The event was not public, but it was widely reported. For many in Ilkley, it brought a sense of closure, though not comfort. Martha's death had left a deep wound in the community. The aftermath. The house on Riddings Road became a point of quiet curiosity. Some locals avoided walking past it, others whispered about the tragedy for years afterwards. Ilkley, despite its reputation as a peaceful spa town, had been reminded that violence could strike anywhere, even in the most respectable streets. Martha Smith was buried in the area, though her grave is not widely known today. Her story faded from public memory as the decades passed. But the murders remain one of Ilkley's darkest moments. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Silent Dale's Dark Tales. As always, I'm just an amateur doing this as a hobby, exploring the stories that have shaped Yorkshire's past. If you found this interesting, please consider subscribing. There are many more forgotten tales waiting to be uncovered. Until next time, stay safe and keep wandering the silent dales where dark tales linger.